Are we on? All right. Good. Nice. This is better. All right. I apologize for that delay. I am not really good at this live streaming stuff, even though I work pretty hard to get there. But here I am, coming to you live on this perfect night. Gosh, okay. All right, this is better. So, all right. Well, this is Forrest, host of the Pancake King Life and Marriage on the Spectrum, a podcast and YouTube series about life and marriage on the autism spectrum. And this is my first go at doing a live stream on YouTube from this channel. If you want to check out stuff that I do with my wife and I, we read books, Star Wars books mostly, and we occasionally live stream video games. That content has been a bit more inconsistent lately just because, my wife is pregnant right now, and it's getting a bit crazier with that as the months progress. Time is definitely going by faster than I thought it would, which is interesting. The baby itself isn't due until December 6th. That's the due date that the doctors gave us. And we're here at the beginning of June, and it just kind of feels like it's flying a little bit. I thought that the time would go by a bit faster. April was a slog. May was pretty fast, like much to my surprise. And so I'm just kind of taking a little bit of time tonight to, test out the streaming, chill. Probably won't do this for long, to be honest. I kind of really want to throw on some comfortable clothes and just enjoy my Friday night. I've got a really busy Friday night ahead of me. I'm attending a wedding. We'll be spending time with friends, going and seeing that new John Wick Universe movie, Ballerina. I'm a huge fan of that series, and I'm not typically a huge fan of just, mindless action movies, but there's something about the John Wick series that to me has, there's a lot of charisma about those. There's a lot of fun to be had with those. I think the world is really interesting. Whenever the movies do delve into storytelling, it's pretty cool. So, I'm excited to see that, and then, have some pretty big stuff going on Sunday. But yeah, it goes without saying, like, the biggest thing to have happened to me recently, aside, of course, from the fact that I learned I'm going to be a dad, is I published my very first novel this last month on May 26th. My first novel came out, which I can now actually finally present a physical copy of it. The Glass God, the first book in the Glass trilogy. And guys, there we go. Guys, it's insane. Like, it's insane to actually be sitting here with a copy of my book and flipping through these pages. It's such a beautiful looking book too. I know I'm kind of being maybe a little bit pretentious here for a second, just kind of showing off like just how this book looks. It is really, it's it's such a surreal feeling, that after 3 years of working on this book and writing it and, and editing it and editing it, having other people read it and give me feedback, hiring, a company to make the cover, which, by the way, the company that made the cover for me is called Demonza. And if you're someone who is writing a book and have every intention of getting it published, I strongly recommend them. I really do. They make beautiful covers. They made a beautiful format for the whole thing, front and back. It was just incredible what they did. Really bringing the vision of the book to life. And I have already gotten it shelved in a few local coffee shops that also they're coffee shops, but there's a coffee shop that is also a bookstore, and then a store that's just a bookstore, just an indie bookstore, and then I'll be taking more copies next week to another local bookstore / coffee shop. I'm pretty excited for. So be doing author signing events in the area as well, which I'm really, really excited about. It's so weird. It's so surreal. And the funny thing is, as someone who has aspired to be an author, most of his life, and to not just, to write a book and also publish it so that other people can read my work. It's kind of funny because once you finish it and the book is out and it's on shelves and it's on Amazon, link in the description below for that, by the way. It's so weird because I'm sitting there, I'm sitting there on the couch, and after the book is published, and I have what I like to call post-published or post-publication regrets, where you're just wondering to yourself, where I'm just I'm asking myself all these questions, and I'm wondering, was it too soon to publish it? I mean, you're never going to feel 100% confident that the time that you got the book published was the right time to publish it. You're never going to get there. You really do just have to kind of pull the trigger and put it out there and let the strangers, tell you what they think. Family and friends, they'll read the book, or they won't, and they'll tell you it was great, it was really good. And the truth is, some of them don't think it's good, but they'll tell you it's good anyway. And I don't know this yet personally. I still yet have a couple of family members who started reading the book to let me know what they really think of it. But you do have these kind of post-publication regrets. There are a few things in the book that, I'm not happy with. I wish I did a little bit better with. And again, I'm just going to have to see what total strangers think of the book, when they read it. But, there are a couple of things that, honestly, right before my next book comes out, I will be making some tweaks to this novel. For anyone who's just coming in, I'm talking about my novel, The Glass God, that I just published on May 26th. You can find it on Amazon, as well as a couple local bookstores. But anyway, there are a couple of things that I'm definitely planning on tweaking. Nothing having to do with plot or necessarily character. It's just very, very little things, how I describe certain things in the book and stuff like that. Because one of the things that I was told by a family member who wants to be really, really honest with me, instead of sugarcoating it for me, and I appreciate that, is that I tend to be the type of person who likes to describe in pretty explicit detail the types of clothes that characters are wearing, or the way their hair is and their hair color and stuff like that. And it's it's better to just go with the less is more framework and kind of describe things minimally so that you leave gaps for the readers to kind of fill. And honestly, to hear that, though, to learn that that's something that I can do and something that I can apply to my writing in the future, that takes a whole lot of pressure off of me. It really does. Because when it came to describing the physical appearances of characters and stuff like that, I always felt this pressure to do it. Otherwise readers would feel like I'm being lazy or something like that. So I may have overwritten in a few places, and I'm willing to admit that. Right before my next book comes out, I plan on making some tweaks. I like to use the term that's used for video games, patch notes, like I plan on doing some little minor tweaks to the book right before the next one comes out. So that and I can kind of make these little changes and these little fixes. And I'm also working on a short story that I'm going to attach to the end of the book in the next edition, so that people will feel a little bit more incentivized to buy the book for more reasons than just, oh, I made a few little tweaks here and there. And also, what works with that strategy too is that when you, like when I make the necessary tweaks and polish the book up even more, anyone who reads my next book, who haven't read my first book, if they end up liking what they read and they want to see more of what I've written, and they look up this book, they'll feel a little bit more what's the word? But they'll get the version of the book that I really want them to read. For anyone who reads my next book, really likes it and wants to see what else I've written. So yeah, I mean, I can go on and on and on about what the process was like, like reading this book. I plan on kind of reading a sample at the end of the stream. I'll probably kind of cut that together later because I'm recording this at the same time that I'm streaming this. I'll probably cut that together and release it later, to attract more people's attention. But yeah, The Glass God, book 1 of the Glass trilogy. I'll even read the blurb for you, because it's pretty cool, honestly. So the blurb for the book, the Glass God, is: in a city that's forgotten its own name, power is taken, not given. Welcome to Glass, a neon-drenched empire where crime syndicates masquerade as pop stars, youth is preserved in a bottle, and freedom is a currency few can afford. Daniel Kostov, better known as Captain, has just murdered a legend. With blood on his hands and his father's empire in ruins, he sees a chance to rebuild something bigger, something entirely his own. As Captain recruits new allies and makes enemies of old ones, a quiet war begins to simmer beneath the city's glittering surface. Among his recruits is Benji, a haunted young man with secrets of his own, and Sparks, an unsettling stranger with ulterior motives. Every choice Captain makes threatens to unravel the fragile illusion of control he's fought to create. Betrayals will come, loyalties will be tested, and the city will decide who gets to become a god and who gets swept into the gutter. So, yeah, that's the blurb for the book that you can find on Amazon. Link is in the description below. There's a lot about this book that I absolutely love. Obviously, it's not perfect, but, I'm still really, really happy with it. And I'm also just glad that I got it finished too. There are so many books that I've tried writing in my life that never got finished, never saw the light of day. And guess what? They will never see the light of day. And that's perfectly fine, because they suck. So anyway, I can ramble on and on about that, but to be honest, I don't really think it's necessary. I'm happy that it's out there. I'm happy that anyone can read it now. And while it's been a slow process to get the book out in front of other people, as many people as possible, it's still been a fantastic experience. And I've learned a lot and will be taking a lot into, the next 8 books that I plan on writing. The next book I'm writing is actually the first book in another trilogy. Yes, I will be working on the second book of the Glass trilogy, but the next book I'm working on is actually a fantasy book that is intended for children, though adults can read it and enjoy it too. And there's some jokes in there that adults would get. I think that's I think that's really I think that's really fun. And it is, it is for children. Like if The Glass God was written for older young adults and adults, the first book of the Dusk trilogy is absolutely kid friendly and family friendly. Parents can read it to their children. I would love it if they did that, and children themselves can read it. But it's a fantasy book, and it is about a young man who learned that his mother had just passed away, and he lives in a different town away from his parents at this point. He lives with his pregnant wife, who kind of comes from an interesting race of people, that are capable of magic. And this young man sets off on a journey to go attend his mother's funeral. And as he's doing so, along the way, he's stopping at these different places. And he ends up having to help people that are in some pretty dire situations, or situations where they just simply need help. And he feels obligated to help them, along the way, even though he has a funeral to attend. And this is also a story that, kind of like The Glass God, this is also a story that I've had in my mind for a really, really long time. Was literally talking about the premise with a friend of mine the night before my wedding day. That's how far back this story goes. And the fact that it's stuck with me this long, and the fact that I'm still this passionate about it, means it's a story that it just needs to be told. It's supposed to be told. It's like The Glass God, that's a story that I could have just given up on and just never finished. But I kept going and going and going, unlike literally every other book in my life. And I think it's pretty special and pretty incredible that I've reached a point in my life where it seems like anytime I come up with a book idea, I will write it all the way to the end. But yes, that's going to be a trilogy on its own. So I've got the Glass trilogy going on. I've got this fantasy trilogy going on. There will be more details about that later on. Hopefully by the end of the year, I will have a lot more to announce about it, because I do plan on releasing this book by next year. And there are other books that I'm planning on writing. So, when you consider there's 5 books already, the 3 of the fantasy trilogy, and then the books 2 and 3 of the Glass trilogy. Plus there's some spin-offs with the Glass trilogy that I'm planning on writing. I have some really interesting ideas. I have a spin-off that's kind of like a cross between an old Western and RoboCop, which is pretty fun. And yeah, honestly, and my plan is to just keep writing. Honestly, my plan is just to keep writing books until I'm so old that I can't put pen to paper anymore. That's my plan. I am really, really passionate about storytelling. I'm hoping that one day I'll be able to, evolve beyond the medium of books. And while I will still write books, I want to be able to kind of grow and evolve beyond that medium and, shoot an indie movie someday, and maybe even shoot an indie movie with an iPhone. Turns out you can do that. You can shoot some really good looking movies on an iPhone. And if that's where I have to start, that's where I have to start. But I am hoping to kind of grow and evolve into those other mediums and, and tell these stories, because I have a lot of them. Heck, I even have an indie movie idea. Not going to get into that yet, but there is something, I have an idea for that as well. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on to the next topic. My last podcast episode, which had really nothing to do with autism, life and marriage on the autism spectrum, but it was something really special to me. I got to interview Isaac Slade, the former lead singer of the Fray. The link to the full interview is in the description below, and that was amazing. And honestly, at this point, I'm going to push my chair up. At this point, there we go. Now my back feels better. At this point, I can honestly, I can tell the whole story of how I was able to arrange an interview with Isaac. And it is a pretty funny and incredible story. So I had this idea a couple months ago, a really, really stupid idea, where I just thought, with everything going on in my life, with my wife and I having, expecting, and, me about to publish my first book and everything, I kind of thought, wouldn't it be cool if I can like maybe take a plane to Wisconsin and, actually see Isaac at the record store that he's opened up in, not Wisconsin. Did I say Wisconsin? I meant Washington. That he opened up in Washington. It's called Sidestack Records, by the way, if you happen to be up in Washington and are not aware. Isaac Slade runs a record shop, and it's called Sidestack Records. And I thought, hey, maybe I can take a plane to Washington, spend a few days up there, and go see his shop and meet with him personally. And a friend of mine told me, well, I have a much cheaper idea. I have a much cheaper idea. Why don't you, I'll save you like $1,200 or however much it would cost me to do this. Why don't you just call his shop, right? And I'm like, wow, that is a brilliant idea. I wish I had thought of that. Because as it turns out, if you Google Sidestack Records, or any business for that matter, most of them will have a phone number up. So I, looked up Sidestack Records, and yeah, sure enough, there was a phone number. And I'm like, well, surely it wouldn't just be as easy as just calling him, because surely it wouldn't be as easy as just calling him because, I don't know, he's a busy guy, and even though he opened up the shop, I imagine he's not actually in the shop most of the time. And I came across, yes, I know the AC is running in the background. I'm not going to get up and go, you know what, I'm going to go get up and shut it off. No one's watching right now anyway. Anyway, I'm back. It'll shut off eventually. So, anyway, so I looked up Isaac Slade's number, and I happened to come across an article actually about Sidestack Records where it said that Isaac tended to be there on Mondays. I'm like, okay, we'll try a Monday then. And, I work from home. I have the pleasure of working from home most days of the week, which is fantastic. I love it. And I call, I take the phone number during one of my breaks. I call up the shop, and a woman answers, and and I just asked her, as if I already knew the guy. I asked her, is Isaac there? And she said, yeah, hold on 1 minute. And I just froze at that point. I froze. I could not believe it. I couldn't believe that in that moment, there was actually a chance that I would be able to talk to Isaac. And, hang on. And, I just realized I had this opportunity then to, to talk to Isaac. Oh my God, this woman is going to put Isaac on the phone. It was that simple. And it took a solid minute or two for Isaac to get on the phone. And then he gets on the phone, he says hello, and I knew it was him. As soon as I heard him, I knew it was him. Cause I've been listening to his music for a long, long time. And I am so sorry, guys. I know it's so unprofessional, but my mustache will not stop tickling my nose, and it sucks. I am so sorry. Anyway, gosh. I've been listening to Isaac's music for a really long time, And so when I hear his, like when you've been listening to a guy's music for so long and you hear his voice over the phone, you know that voice, you recognize that voice. And for at least the first minute, I couldn't talk clearly. I was out of breath. My heart was hammering. I was trying to tell Isaac all these things that I wanted, that I wanted so badly to tell him, things that I hadn't even thought I would tell him at any point. Because again, I've been listening to his music for so long, for like over a decade. His music has always been like special to me. Again, I mentioned before that my favorite music album of all time is Scars and Stories. And he was incredibly kind. Just really, I mean, honestly, like, considering his reputation and his music, his musical background, his career and everything, considering people who come from that kind of world, maybe you expect someone who's kind of like, like arrogant, someone who is very self-indulgent, pretentious and stuff like that. That wasn't Isaac. Isaac was an incredibly kind person, both on the phone and in the interview, if you've seen it. And one of the things that struck me about him was just how, I know it sounds kind of funny to say, but just how real he was. Like, by the time I got to talking to him in the interview, and by the time we did the interview, it had been like maybe a month and a half since I first spoke with him on the phone. And by the time I got to talk to him on the interview, I had kind of gotten the jitters off of me. It was easy for me to start talking to him like I talk to anyone else. And one of the reasons why it was so easy for me to do it at that point, besides the fact that I just had so much time to mentally prepare myself, was because he made it easy. He made it easy to talk to him. And I'm super, super grateful for that. I think I made the right choice by hyping up this interview, by releasing a video about it beforehand, so people got to find out that I was doing it. The view count for the video has been sort of slowly rising. It's one of the better interviews that I've done. And I am super grateful, super, super grateful that I got to do it. It's a dream come true, and it's something that I just literally, the idea just came to me, for the most part, this year. It just came to me almost out of nowhere. Like, the idea of getting a hold of Isaac Slade from the Fray and doing an interview with him, that wasn't even a passing thought, for years and years. Like, it never happened. So the fact that it happened this year, and the fact that I had that thought this year and that I was able to make it work, is incredible. Just what an awesome dude, and what a really interesting life that he led. It has made me wonder who else I can potentially reach out to interview. I can think of a few people that I would love to have, just sit down and have a conversation with. Unfortunately, some people are going to be pretty much impossible to get a hold of. And part of that is because they want it that way. I thought it was so interesting that by opening up his own shop and, and being someone who would be there at the shop and not just kind of faceless guy, working the shop in the background and stuff like that. He opened the shop, and then the shop would have a phone number, therefore making it easy for people to get a hold of him. It's actually easy to get a hold of Isaac Slade from the Fray now, which is insane. I thought it was so interesting that he put himself in a position where he made himself pretty accessible. I hope that people don't take advantage of that. I really don't. I didn't even want to tell other people that I knew, the shop's number and everything, which you can find online. It's there. It's not a secret or anything, but I wonder if I am the only person that did that. Or, maybe other people have thought of it and just felt like they didn't want to dare doing it, because of course you would be afraid that you're, intruding on this person, or, or being a nuisance or something like that. And Isaac was incredible, like absolutely incredible. He could have, he could have been mean about it, but he wasn't, and that's amazing. And I also want to give a shout out to everyone again who submitted questions for me to ask Isaac. I'm really, really glad that I was able to put this together and make a couple people happy. This made people happy, and that's amazing. I think that's really, really cool. So anyway, Isaac was great. He even emailed me directly again earlier after I sent him a link to the interview, and just emailed me directly and thanked me for inviting him. And it was a pleasure, Isaac. Thank you so much. I imagine I'm going to have less time to do stuff like this when a little baby comes along. So, yeah. Thanks, son or daughter, whatever you'll be. We'll find out next month. Or no, I find out later this month, actually. So, anyway. Moving on to the next topic that I wanted to talk about, and that was kind of the podcast itself. The podcast itself, the Pancake King, Life and Marriage on the Autism Spectrum. I did say in an earlier video that I was going to be more inconsistent with, putting out videos, and I definitely have been. And that's something I'm not too happy with, only because I've really enjoyed seeing like my subscriber count go up. I definitely have gained more subscribers since I put out the interview for Isaac, and that's tough because I know there are people who subscribed because they saw my interview with Isaac Slade and they're like, oh, okay, I really liked that. I want to see, more of what more Forrest here can put out, talking to other people that are famous or something. And look, that's rare. It's actually quite rare that happens. I got to interview Brant Hansen last year, who was also amazing. I got to interview Brant Hansen, the host of the show, the Brant and Sherry Oddcast, as well as the author of several books, which I have on my shelf over there, such as The Men We Need and Blessed Are the Misfits. And what was his newest one? Oh, no. Life is Hard. Yeah, Life is Hard, God is Good, Let's Dance. That was his newest one. I believe he came out with it last year. I think it was actually like the beginning of last year. And I think he's working on another book now. He also wrote Unoffendable. So, yeah, he's a very talented author. I really like him. And I really recommend that you check out that episode where we talk if you haven't already. It got deeper than I thought it would. It's a lot less like a formal, like if my interview with Isaac was a bit more formal, my interview with Brant was actually more of just a conversation, especially in the middle. It gets pretty deep in the middle, which I was not expecting. And I love that. I love those kinds of surprises, I highly recommend that you check out my interview with Brant. As far as like what my next interview will be, who I can find that I might be able to talk to, don't know. I have absolutely no clue, but I'm excited to see who else I might be able to reach out to, and who all I can reach out to before the end of the year. But yes, the podcast has been more inconsistent lately. That's why I'm recording this so that I can put it out later in podcast form for anyone who, might be interested in listening to it if they just enjoy listening to me ramble and talk. But it's hard. People might think I think people have this idea that it's easy to come out with content about the autism spectrum. And I'm here to tell you, with someone who has been doing this show in some form for 3 years now, that it's not. It's not easy to come up with content for conversations about the autism spectrum. Because eventually you run into the problem, or you run into the risk of repeating yourself, of repeating a lot of the same talking points, and covering the same topics involved within autism. And another reason why I have not been on top of this as much as I used to be, aside from the fact, of course, that, life has gotten busier with the baby coming and everything, is that autism is not the thing that I am the most passionate about talking about. It is something that I'm still passionate about talking about for sure, and that's why I have an outlet for it. That's why I do a show for it. But, autism is something that I am not as passionate. It's not the thing that I'm most passionate about. I was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. My wife was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. My middle brother was diagnosed on the spectrum. And I also know a fair number of people, and have known a fair number of people in my life who got diagnosed. And I love all of them. I cherish them. I am proud of them. And I recognize the traits in them that make them autistic. And I root for all of them. I want them to be able to live the absolute best lives that they can. One of my earlier messages with this show when I first started was that I wanted people on the autism spectrum to bring them, to come to the conclusion, the right and rational conclusion, that they are capable of living pretty normal lives. It may not be, as normal as others, but it can be normal enough. And I've also just kind of learned recently that when you're talking about autism is a spectrum. There's a higher functioning end of it, and there's a lower functioning end of it, and then there's even some in between. And the problem with doing episode after episode after episode of talking about my experiences on the autism spectrum, or just talking about autism in general, is that it's really easy to, as hard as this may be to believe for some of you, it's hard to put myself in the mindset of knowing that my kind of autism is not the only kind of autism out there. That there are people on the spectrum, especially and children too, that are in so devastating of a position with their place on the autism spectrum, a place that's so debilitating that they can barely live, let alone survive. And sometimes I do feel like I ignore that in this show. I have had people point out to me that, I tend to kind of only think about the portion of the spectrum that I'm on, and that can be easy to do. Higher functioning is not the same thing as lower functioning. And I've talked to people, or I've interacted with people who were lower functioning, and I loved being with them, and I loved spending time with them. But, the sad and tragic truth is that, higher functioning people on the autism spectrum start out with a certain set of traits, or a checklist almost, a checklist of traits, things that make them autistic. And as they grow up, they can learn to kind of work on those traits, to manage them better, to, reduce them so that they don't have nearly as huge of an impact on their lives as they had before. But when it comes to people on the severe end of the spectrum, people who just have it so much worse, people who can't even speak, I mean, the problem is that they're kind of in a place where they're stagnant. They're in a stagnant place. They will never be able to reach a point where they can live on their own and do certain things on their own. And sometimes even just understand essential things in life needed to survive. And I'm not saying that to put them down at all, to discourage those kinds of people, or to discourage the people who take care of them. And I really hope and pray that, people on the severe end of the spectrum will be given something that will help them, restore some balance in their lives, to give them the ability to learn the skills that they need to live on their own, or to just live and to know where they are, at any given moment, and to think like, us. That's, it's so difficult to think that there are people out there on the autism spectrum who are not as lucky as me, and a lot of other people on the spectrum as well. I think us on the higher functioning end of the spectrum tend to kind of isolate ourselves in this camp where we think that the only autistic people out there are ones like us. So I know I'm rambling with that a bit, but that's the truth. That's, we tend to kind of separate ourselves in these camps. We tend to think of ourselves as more important than others. And that's sad. That's tragic, because there are people in severe parts of the spectrum that will never be able to do the same things that we do. And that's heartbreaking. And while I have a few people, watching this stream, if you know anyone who is, kind of dealing with severe autism, or you have loved ones who have loved ones of their own that are on the kind of the more severe end of the autism spectrum, take this opportunity to share this story. Share your story in the chat. I would love to hear it. And then in the comment section later, if the story is too long and you need to put a lot in there. But I kind of want to diversify the way that I talk about autism on this show, because, again, I tend to talk a lot about high functioning autism, and it's fine to, it's fine to narrow it down. It's fine to narrow it down to something that I'm familiar with, something that I know a lot about, because I clearly don't know as much about severe autism as I should. And the argument can be made that I really, really should, in order for this show to grow and to, and to expand and to reach more people. I want people on the autism spectrum to feel like they can live normal lives, as normal as they can. But then there are also the people with severe autism who can't, and that's sad. I don't really know what other word to use except sad. It's how we on the autism spectrum deal with explaining emotions. We're not very good at describing our emotions. We're not very good at describing how we feel. So we either tend to use really, really basic words like sad or mad, or sometimes we can go to extremes. My middle brother is someone who has had the tendency in the past to kind of go for extremes. And I will say, he has gotten a lot better, so much better in unpacking how he's feeling and what he's going through and what he thinks. And I'm really, really proud of him for that. The progress that he has made growing up has been spectacular, and nothing short of a miracle, honestly. But yeah, this is a show that's not easy to do. It may look easy, the way that I record these videos and edit them and put them together and try to make them watchable and try to make them digestible. And I try to make them professionally made and everything. That's, it is so much harder than it looks. And it's one of the reasons why I just kind of stopped trying to do it every week, because whenever I try to do it every single week, the projects suffer as a result. The quality the quality suffers as a result too. I do plan on releasing a new podcast episode soon, but I want to know what other people want to see me talk about when it comes to the autism spectrum. And I want to even expand, I kind of want to expand my reach a little bit so that I'm maybe not just talking specifically about autism, but also about other life things, things that affect us day to day and define our lives. Autism doesn't define me. The funny thing is, I talk about autism more on this show than I even talk about in real life. When I'm on this show, I talk about autism. In real life, I talk about almost literally anything else. I'll talk about Star Wars. I'll talk about writing. I'll talk about storytelling. I'll talk about just kind of like philosophy, Christianity, a little bit of politics here and there. I don't talk about politics nearly as much as I used to, because in all honesty, talking about politics as excessively as I used to kind of destroyed me in a way. It burnt me out and kind of broke me apart, and I don't think it's worth it. I don't think obsessing over politics is worth it. That's one of the reasons why I simply don't even talk about politics on this show, and when I do, I try to tackle it from a bit of what's the word that they use? It's not what is it? From a bipartisan standpoint. I did a video about RFK Jr., but I don't even really talk about it from a political perspective. I talk about how what RFK Jr.'s words mean for the autism community. I did a video about Elon Musk, but only exclusively talked about whether or not he could potentially be on the autism spectrum, which, Elon confirms this in an SNL episode. So it's talking about his autism and whether or not his behavior is linked to autism somehow, or is it completely and utterly his, the decisions that he makes, which I do very firmly believe that people who are higher functioning on the autism spectrum are fully capable of making bad decisions. And just like everyone else, they need to hold themselves accountable, and other people need to hold them accountable for those bad decisions. We're not immune from making bad decisions. We're not free from being able to make bad decisions without consequences. That's a very, very firm belief that I have. So I don't know. It's a lot of rambling to kind of get to the point that I wanted to make about my time making the show. I will continue to make this show as long as I still have ideas, and even if the idea well when it comes to autism runs dry, I will find a way to rebrand the show and expand beyond it, because honestly, there's a lot that I can talk about. There's so much that I would love to talk about, and I would love to talk about it with all of you. And it would be great to just kind of expand, kind of grow beyond the topic of autism, where I can weave autism into certain conversations, but I can also talk about other things that are on my mind. And I kind of want to do that. I kind of want to do a show where it's more about the things that are on my mind, having to do with, with life and, life, love, happiness, stuff like that. And, as I'm doing it, I want to be able to make someone's day, by doing it. So, I mean, for all I know, this show could just be exclusively about autism, with the exception of the occasional break, like my interview with Isaac Slade. For all I know, it could continue to be about this, for years to come. Or maybe next year I'll rebrand it and kind of start fresh. considering that I have a kid on the way, I mean, that's going to potentially create a lot of potential for new topics having to do with, an autistic couple raising a child together. What if that child ends up with autism? What if that child ends up on a different place on the autism spectrum than we are? We have had those kinds of conversations. We've talked about that. We've wondered if that, that could potentially happen. So, yeah. Yeah, a lot of rambling. Wow. I'm amazed that I was capable of doing that. So, anyway, I'm going to wrap this up because my voice is getting tired and it's really hard for me to do this for 50 minutes straight. Where are we? With the time stamp. Yes. Oh, yeah. It's definitely time for me to get going. So, I'm going to wrap it up here. Before I go, though, one more time. My novel, The Glass God, is available on Amazon. The link to buy the book is in the description below. You can find my book for paperback and Kindle on there. My full interview with Isaac Slade from the Fray is also in the link in the description below. And you can find all of my other social media tags, like Facebook, X, or not Facebook, excuse me. I don't have a Facebook page, but do I? Maybe I do. I don't know. Do I? No, I don't. Or at least I think I do. I just don't promote it because who uses Facebook pages anymore? Seriously. But yeah, there's like my links to Substack, to TikTok, Spotify, and X, and Instagram. It's all there. You can, you can like follow me on social media. You can buy my book, The Glass God, and I will see you guys next week with new content. Bye, everybody. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Bye.